we start. So Ann Betz, we have her, and she's the co-founder of BEabove Leadership and an international speaker. She's a trainer who is in the intersection of neuroscience, coaching, and human transformation. She's also co-developed BEabove Leadership's popular training programs for advanced coaches. Ann was a faculty member and has served as the neuroscience consultant for many years. She provides neuroscience leadership and coaching consultancy to many other corporations and nonprofits. And she's also someone who has been authoring groundbreaking white papers on brain research and coaching, contributing to a lot of magazines, publications, and blogs. So Ann is the leader author of Integration, which is the power of being co-active in work and life and exploration of consciousness and the future. So we are glad to have you, Ann, very much. And here the stage is yours.
We are going to be talking about, oh my gosh, let's see, what do I want to say? I have been a coach for 20 years. I live in Santa Fe, New Mexico, which is in the desert and 2 states over from California. So it's very early in the morning here. I have worked, though, internationally. Probably one of the few places I've never been in person is India. So to do presentation, but I've presented all over the world. I have a real passion for taking our profession. Like I said, I've been doing this for 21 years this fall, since 2001. I have a passion for taking this profession and making it intersect with science, so that our clients that may not be as open-minded, we can give them a really good scientific argument for coaching. So as a result of that, I've looked at lots and lots of different areas of science. I'm fascinated by what is cutting edge in neuroscience. And one of the things that is very interesting and new is this idea of thinking outside the brain, or what is technically called the extended mind. And that's what we're going to talk about in our session today, is how coaching actually helps our clients not be limited. I have brains all over because I do brain work. I have like little mini brains. So I think my cats play with this one, but how we are not limited to this, but that we actually have an entire system that can help us be more efficient, be smarter. But what is that, first of all, and how do we do that? So that's what I want to talk about today. So I call this Your Brain is Not Enough, because actually our little brains, hopefully a little bigger than this, maybe more like this size, are not enough for the demands of today's world, and they're not enough for our clients. So let's talk about what it means to think outside the brain. So here's what I want to talk with you about. What does it mean to extend the mind? Why does this matter so much in today's world? What we already do. And this is always what I'm so excited about for coaches, is I'm not going to be talking only today about you should be doing this and you should be doing that. It's like, let's look at what you are already doing, because this is one of the reasons coaching works. So I want you to both have hopefully some new ideas, but also feel very proud of yourselves as coaches, that what you're doing already is helping your clients not just be limited to their brains. So roughly that's what we'll do. As I said, let's go into this. I love this quote. This is from an American comedian named Emo Phillips. He says, "I used to think the brain was the most wonderful organ in my body. Then I realized who was telling me this." So I love this because it just reminds us, like, we are more. This is an important part of who we are, but we are way, way more than this. So whatever the current, this is something I learned in neuroscience, which I've been deeply engaged with for about 12 years. I've been working hard to be someone in the coaching field who is helping make these connections. There are a few of us who are both experts in neuroscience and coaching, who are saying what we do is very grounded and understandable. And part of my background is graduate studies in neuroscience, in the neuroscience of leadership. So I'm looking at this not just as someone who's sort of curious, but I am actually trained in how to read the science and how to look at the scientific articles and how to make sense of all of it, how to put it all together. That's a big passion for me. So when I was studying neuroscience, one of the things that became very quickly clear to me is that whatever the current model, wherever we are with technology, tends to be the way we describe the brain or think about the brain. And so often these days, you may hear the brain sort of compared to a computer. The brain is a computer. The problem with that is that the computer is a closed system with software and hardware. It's a closed system. You can put things into it, but it doesn't interact unless it is told to do so with the systems around it. So, sorry, he wants to say hello, and now he's going to go on the floor. So the problem is that our brains really are not largely computers. There may be parts of it where sometimes this is an okay analogy, but for the most part, I no longer think of the brain as a computer. So other people have said, well, the brain is a muscle. You can grow it, you can develop it, you can practice things. That is also true to some degree, but that really speaks to a very individualistic view of the brain. Again, closed, it reinforces this idea of individualism, that we are separate, that how we think is separate, and our job is to just get stronger within us. Now, one of the things that I would love for you to comment in the comments as we go is, what do you feel like is different in Indian culture, if that is your culture? Because I think there's a couple of aspects that play into this. One is there are a lot of Western, sort of the Western view of individualism that may not resonate. The other is, I know, particularly in the corporate world, that the Western view of things infiltrates the world. So please, let me know, no, that's not how I don't believe that is exactly how we see this in our culture, or yes, it is. So help me with that.
And
Because
we have someone from Nigeria also.
oh, hello, Nigeria. Well, you can also say
so
if that is different as well. Are you wonderful? Yeah, I didn't want to make the assumption that everybody was in India or from India. So thank you. So what I'm saying is these are very common metaphors for the brain, or ways that we talk about the brain. And I want to propose a new one. And it's a very different one. And it's that the brain might be more like a magpie. Do you have magpies in India? Actually, we have them in various parts of the United States and Canada, I know, probably other countries as well, I think in Europe. But they're a very interesting bird, because what they're known for is they will make their nest from whatever is around them. And in South Korea, actually, there was a big problem with the electrical grid, because magpies in South Korea were building their nests using electrical wires on top of the electrical posts, and they shorted out all of Seoul. So magpies use what is there. If there are twigs like this little magpie has, they'll build their nest from a twig. If there's barbed wire, like in the American Southwest, they'll build their nest from barbed wire. If there are electrical wires and no trees in South Korea, they'll build their nest from that. We are proposing that is much more actually how the brain works, that the brain is, I'll read you a little quote, thought is an act of continuous assembly and reassembly that happens inside the skull and out in the world. The kinds of materials that we have to think with affect the nature and quality of the thought that can be produced. Our brains are magpies. They're impacted by everything, by our human relationships, by what's going on in our body, by the space around us. And these are all things that we need to be aware of, but we can also use individually and as coaches. So I also like this new thought, and we'll talk a little more about this, that to be intelligent is not a fixed property of an individual. To think well, it is a state dependent on extra neural outside the brain resources and the knowledge of how to use them. That's what this world is now demanding. So let's talk more about that. Why do we need to extend our minds? What is this? And then I'll tell you what it means. But why might we need to move to have more than just what's available inside the skull? Well, one reason is there are limits on the biological brain. And if any of you, you feel this, we all feel this, I think, every day. In fact, go ahead and type in the chat, if you would. What are some of the limits you feel your own brain has? And I'll mention a few, and you can tell me if that resonates with you. I know one of the limits that my brain has is memory. I can't remember everything. That's why, that's why all my phone numbers are in here, and my calendar is in here. And how many of you, somebody asks you, are you free a week from Wednesday? You don't know. You have to look at your calendar. There are limits to what we can remember. So if we're smart, we offload that. We extend our mind. We don't try to keep it all in here. So what other limits do people recognize? You can put in the chat. Is anything, I can't see the chat right now for whatever reason. What other limits do you feel like your brain has?
Please feel free to share. What do you think are the limits of your brain? Put it on the chat window.
Limits of your brain. Memory. I'll mention another one. Sometimes the ability to pay attention. Our brain has limits in how much it can keep in attention. That famously, neuroscience, the person who really came up with the idea of neuroscience of leadership and kind of founded that field is a man named David Rock. He talks about our ability to have one thing on stage at a time. So if I can only have one thing on stage at a time, what do I do with the rest? Notes and numbers, yeah, and memory. I'm getting memory. Notes and numbers, yeah. My brain has limits to its ability to calculate. Now, some people are savants or just very gifted, and they can calculate. Well, you can give them, 10-digit numbers and they can calculate it, but that's rare for humans. Generally, we have limits to what we can just do in our brain. Unable to multitask exactly. Yeah. So we have sometimes a challenge to just have enough energy to persist at challenging tasks. Dealing with abstract concepts can be somewhat limited. We need help with that. Ability to assess what's right and wrong, decision making, that can be impacted too by how much cognitive load we have going on. Understand directions. Yeah, and these days we have extended our minds to not have to do all of these things because we have limits. So that's one reason we need to extend our minds. Another is that we have cognitive biases, such as familiarity. Another reason that we need to extend our mind is complexity of the world and information overload. Many of us use ways on our computer or on our smartphone to simply track information, to keep track of articles or ideas, because there is so much available to us. The world is so complex. Our brains cannot remember it all, so we don't try to. And then the last reason is we've always extended our minds. This is how we are wired as human beings. We are wired this way. This isn't a new thing. There's one aspect of it that is newer, but generally everything I'm going to tell you, we have done as long as we have been human. So it's natural that we extend our minds. But I love this quote, and this is the person who is, I think, someone to really pay attention to in this arena. She has a wonderful book called The Extended Mind, is Annie Murphy Paul. And I have that in the resources area. She says, all the mental effort we've been mustering has left many of us and our clients feeling depleted and distracted, unequal to the tasks that never stop arriving in our inboxes. So this is why we need, and this poor little girl, she's already feeling it. This is why we need to figure out how we extend this mind if we are magpies. So what if we used the brain as more of a conductor and less of a workhorse? What if we helped the brain with various ways to extend the mind? So when we think outside our brain, what the research shows is that it allows us to focus more intently, comprehend more deeply, and create more imaginatively. All of these are things I want, but I also know my clients want. And by the way, I'm a trainer, but I'm also an active coach. And I've never stopped coaching over 20 years. And I coach in the executive space, and I do coaching around trauma. I have a wide variety of clients. And I would say everybody wants this to some degree. This is what we want. So here are 4 classic ways of extending the mind, 4 big arenas of extending the mind. Number 1, with other people, using other people's minds. And so I was talking before about the limits that the brain has, but there are some things that we're very, very good at, and we have done since the beginning of time, that we have evolved to do, and that we are very, very good at, potentially. One is connecting with other people, relationship, other people's minds. And we're going to talk about each one of these from a coaching perspective. The body, that we can use our body, sensing and moving with the body, and using the body as an extension of our brain. In fact, one of my friends and colleagues, and I think I have her also on the resources list. Yes, I do. Is a fabulous woman named Amanda Blake, well known in the coaching, in some parts of the coaching world. And she has a wonderful book called Your Body is Your Brain. And the research in neuroscience basically points to that this whole system processes, not just here, but we are processing with every part of our system. So we extend our mind, we can extend our mind to our own body. We can extend our mind using externalization in physical space, and look to see how getting something out of here into physical objects can actually help us grasp and comprehend in a way that if we keep it inside here, we can't. And also really wonderful research on the impact of the spaces around us, the spaces we work in. The third way is often the way people tend to think of, and I've already even mentioned it, is technology. So, but one of the things that has happened is that technology has become sort of the holy grail of extending the mind. It's like, what can we put on the smartphone? The reason for that is probably fairly obvious, because this is what you can monetize. This is what you can charge people money for. If you've got an app or a way or a computer program or something that you can put on the computer or the phone, there's money in it. Whereas if you're just helping someone get in touch with their body, there's generally not money in that except for what they're going to pay you as a coach. So there's been a lot of effort around how do we extend our mind using technology, to the degree to which sometimes this has actually created us losing touch with the other ways we can extend our mind that cost nothing. So I'm a big, big fan of helping our clients be more in touch with the other 3 ways, and using this in an appropriate way, but not trying to offload everything to a device, because that is limiting in and of itself if we don't use all 4 of these ways. So let me pause for a minute, because what I want to go into is looking at how each of these ways shows up in coaching. But I'm curious in this moment, what ahas or questions are coming up? And I will be talking more specifically about how we do each of these 4 things. But what's interesting to you so far? What are you curious about? And we'll just take a little pause for questions. Too much thinking. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, what's interesting? What are you intrigued by? The overview, and what I'll do in each of the 4 areas is sort of give you a general overview. Then we're going to look at coaching, and I'd like you to be thinking about, how do you do this? So the other thing I want to let you know is that everything that I am talking about the research studies are very, very strong. This is very much, I think, cutting edge neuroscience. So every aspect, there are probably, I couldn't tell you, between 10 and 100 research studies on any particular aspect. So one of the ways that we have always, and you do this already, we always extend our minds to other people's minds, to the extent that we tend to, anytime we have a difficult decision or something we want to process or something we want to think about, if we are healthy human beings, it is our natural inclination to reach out to each other. Women, at least as I know it in North America and Europe, we are, and I would imagine in India as well, because I think this is universal, women are more socialized to do this. We are more socialized to reach out to each other. Men are somewhat more socialized, at least in Western culture, to have the belief they should figure everything out themselves. But it's a healthy, we are not meant to contain everything within our own minds. To the degree that neuroscientists are actually starting to say it is wrong to simply put one person in a brain scanner on their own and try to figure out how they're thinking about something, that it is much more accurate to put at least two people in brain scanners to see how they are impacting each other, because we have this tremendous impact on each other. We tend to think together. So we're social creatures. We are oriented to thinking with each other. It's like we naturally sort of have this sense that we've, come up against our own limitations. And this is where, at least pre-COVID, we would wander down the hall, to try to find somebody, say, can I get your thoughts on this? Can I borrow your brain? Can you help me process this? We do this so much as coaches, and I'll talk more about that. We have more cognitive biases when we think alone. So what the research has found is that when people disagree, but they do have a common interest in finding truth or a solution, so they do want to actually break through this. Sometimes they don't. Sometimes there's too much ego and they want to win. They don't want to have a solution. But if people disagree and they want to find a common truth, if they talk it through, what research finds is the best idea, the best argument usually wins, if we do expose ourselves to each other in a collaborative way. Now, there are people that don't want to find the best way through. They just want to win and dominate. So you have to say they usually are people with personality disorders like narcissism. But if you do want to find a solution, you will find a better solution talking it through. The other thing is, no one person can remember everything. We are more effective with collective remembering. No one person can have all of the perspectives on everything. This is why we build teams, so that we can get different perspectives, hold different pieces of memory. It's why we're smarter together. The other thing that happens when we extend our mind to other people is, this just happened to me last night. I have a 26-year-old son, and he is, I'm blessed that he does reach out to me when he's having emotional challenges. And so he wanted to think something through last night. And it was something he was quite, jazzed up about, upset about. And by the time we were done with our conversation, we were laughing. He was feeling pretty good about it. I was telling him I was very proud of how he was handling it, and I was. But he came in with probably his nervous system more on alert, more of a biochemical impact of stress. And just in talking to me, because we do luckily have a good relationship, I could feel his stress level go down. And that is part of the other way that we work with each other. So let's look then in coaching. And I want you to think about, how do you help people extend their mind relationally? So I just had to put this in here. Sorry, just one real quick thing. These are all brain studies. These are all neuroscience studies that have things that have been shown in neuroscience and social science. Having a good listener improves brain health. Social connection makes a better brain. Active listening helps people open up. I always think of that as like, well, duh, of course, we knew that. That's what we do as coaches. We listen actively. The strongest predictor of a species' brain size is the size of its social group. We need to have big brains, and we do have big brains according to our body size. Our brains are fairly large in humans because we need to manage the complexities of our social group. And if any of you have teenage girls in particular, you'll know how complex it is to manage their social, what's going on in their social group. You need a big brain for that. People's happiness depends on the happiness of others with whom they are connected. How happy is your social group is going to have, or your family is going to have a big impact on your own happiness. We attune to each other. Memory, reasoning, decision-making, and other higher level functions do not take place within one brain. They take place across people. So, question. Yeah, go ahead. Was there a question, or if somebody just went off mute?
I think you just went on mute.
Okay. Well, let me do the coaching part and then we'll see what's coming up, because I'm curious what you think about how you do this as coaches. Oh, here's something in the chat. Sorry, I have to scroll down. A lot depends on your belief system. Yeah, say more about that. Whoever posted that, go ahead and come off mute and say more about what you mean by a lot depends on your belief. I think you're probably right, but tell me, say more.
Yeah, hi. So my name is Jha. So a lot depends when you mentioned the word happiness, and then you said happiness depends on others' happinesses and all that. So a lot depends on your belief system as to what exactly do you define happiness with. And if my belief system is that as long as you are trying to find happiness, outside of you, in things, beings, and situations, it will never be permanent.
Yeah,
because
I agree.
Those are all temporary. So,
I agree.
So today, if people are happy, tomorrow they'll be unhappy depending on where they are. One is that. So,
I would absolutely agree with that. As long, in fact, whatever you seek tends to elude you. But I can tell you more what the research about what this research means.
And the second thing what I wanted to understand from you is that when you were stating that you need to extend your mind as coaches, what we have learned so far is that it is not for us to actually is more for us to be curious or use our mind to be curious and agitate the imagination of the coachee, use his skills, his knowledge, his skills, and his ability to find the solution for himself, because that's when he will own it. But if it comes from my mind, it may be difficult for him to own it. So yeah. I'm a little confused out there as to how I will help the coachee to extend his mind into my mind.
I love this. I really love that that's what you brought up. Let me tell you just quickly the happiness stuff. So I don't remember exactly how they were measuring happiness, but they were saying that people's general emotional state, the main point of that research study was to say that if you ask people just to describe their emotional state, and I don't know how they were defining it, but just sort of, happy, good, depressed, whatever, that it had a very strong correlation to the emotional state of the people around them, rather than that it was, if you're with a bunch of people who are negative and depressed, that you should be able to just be happy. And what the research is showing is no matter how hard you try, whatever your belief about what happiness is, it is harder to do if you are surrounded by people who are unhappy. So that was just that. I agree with you that it's not an external thing. And in fact, as coaches, I think this is a lot of what we do is we help people find, I would say probably not happiness, but resonance. The resonant life, the meaningful life, the life of purpose. Okay, so to your second point, absolutely. So, and I used to train coaches and the big training often was for people to come in and to be like, okay, no, I know you've got all the solutions, but your client needs to, it needs to have them go off, find their own solutions. So one of the things that got me very excited when I was looking at extending the mind is, let me see if this makes sense. So I think, the research says we can extend our mind to each other. So like I said, my son called me last night. We talked things through like that. That's a natural human way. He felt better. He was clearer like that. But that was just me as his mom, not his coach. Generally, when we go to a family member or a friend or a coworker or a boss, not a coach, we go to someone else and we want to extend our mind to them. What you are going to have is someone who has their own agenda. And so, yes, you can extend their mind, but it's not like in a clean way. You have to filter through their beliefs and their ideas. And, you can still find something. Here's what's cool. If I extend my mind to my coach, I feel like it's the difference between, I've got a whiteboard in back of my computer, and it's like my whiteboard is full of junk right now. If I extend my mind to a friend, it's like a whiteboard that's full of stuff. If I extend my mind to the coach, it's like a clean whiteboard, because they do not come in with an agenda. They come in hopefully creating the space, asking the questions that help me see, or help me see something in a new way that actually helps my mind get bigger, because they're providing this sort of clear space to do it, not giving me the answer. So I think it definitely, is part of coaching. I probably need to keep going so I don't run out of time, but let me look at all the ways that I sort of thought about it. What do we do in coaching? So the coaching relationship, the relationship of coach and client, is designed to provide this clean, safe, courageous space where the client can make sense of things. It's like this open space where they can extend into. And we may not tell them, yeah, I think you need to quit your job, but we may be able to ask them the question they hadn't thought of. And I think what you said, Ja, was something along the lines of agitate their imagination, which I am now going to steal because I think that's such a great line. Because yes, so that's our job. We're going to, when I think of powerful questions from a neuroscience perspective, I want a question that will spark new potential neural pathways that they may not have been able to look at before, because they were sort of in this closed space. But by me helping them open up, that helps them extend their mind. This, by the way, when I saw this, to me, one of the ahas that I had is, this is why every leader needs a coach like forever. Because we are going to bring in, they might be able to talk things through with their colleagues. They might be able to talk things through with the direct report, but we are going to be that empty whiteboard where they can really explore with no agenda. And it will make them a better leader to have a coach on their team, to be that extended mind. And so, rather than to help them deal with that problem and then go away, I think this is why we need to be part of a leader's team. The other thing, that there's a place that they can, that the clients can sort of process, look at issues, be held in this sort of safe way. There are times where clients will say to me, I've never told anyone this before. They've extended into this safe space that I'm providing that makes them more able to maybe look at difficult issues in their lives. The other thing that we do is we actually help them extend their memories. So, many, many times in coaching, and this is a coaching skill, in addition to agitating their imagination, I may say to a client, I want to, and I do this all the time, I have a lot of long-term clients, and I want to either say to them, this happened this week, I want to just point out, you're in a really different space this December than you were last December. Let's talk about that. I am noticing This is what I am noticing. And here's what I remember from when we talked, or what I even have in my notes. And she didn't remember because she's very much she's in the present. She'd made very good positive strides that I could see that it was harder for her to see. So I was an extension there. Or this has happened a lot too. I might say to the client, I just want to point out that that is the third time in the last 2 months that you have talked about how upset you are with your boss. They're like, wow, I just want to point out a pattern. And so that is something that, that is not our agenda. That is me just articulating what's going on. There's a pattern here. Do you want to talk about that? So we're extending their memories. Coaching itself activates something that my colleague Richard Boyatzis, again, I have a link to him in the resources, calls the social network of the brain. It's a network. It actually stands in opposition to the task network, where we're focused on getting things done. There's another network in the brain that is more concerned with social relationships, empathy, motivation, meaning. And it is when we can reflect on things and we can talk about how we feel, we get different activation in the brain. And for a lot of the people that we coach, in day-to-day life, they are so focused on the tasks that need to get done that they don't take time to kind of dip into this other network. And there's a fascinating white paper by Richard that I put in the resources that is, he calls it the neuroscience of coaching. It's basically all about this social network and really, really interesting. And then I talked about our nervous system. Generally, hopefully, we have done our centering and our grounding to come into coaching so that we're coming in with a more stable nervous system while our clients may be stressed out, and we can help them come to a place where that's more calm and centered, where their own ideas, I think of it as, I don't know if you, as like the sand shifting down, and then you can see what's really there. Sometimes in coaching, that's what we need to do. We need to help them come to a place where they are more settled and capable. So any thoughts really quickly on this? I've got three more areas, and I want to honor time. So let's,
And I have a quick question.
Yeah,
so
please.
While we are saying that we are using this to extend our mind, but I also feel that somehow we are limiting our mind by being dependent on somebody else's brain. So I see it's like a, contradictory thing. And what are your thoughts on this?
I think there is a view often that we should individually manage and be stronger and heal, and that's sort of an individual failing if we can't do it all within our own brain. But I would go back to my argument that there are limits to what this brain can do. And it is very, very difficult. The number one way to regulate your nervous system is actually through social connection. I don't think of it as dependency. I think of it as being strategic and smart. And actually, one of the things that's been happening, I was looking for a quote. One of the things that's been happening is there was a time in our world where IQ went up. It's not going up anymore. It's like we can't get any more individually smart, but we can get better at strategically using resources. And if you think of any really good leader who has a solid organization that will stand the test of time, they understand that they can't know everything here, and they know how to use their people well. They know how to think with people. It's not a weakness, and I don't think it's a dependency. I think it's actually just really smart. But I think the bias in the world that we've been living in for the last few hundred years is you should be able to be just, the ideal is to be as smart as you possibly can on your own. This is I think, a provocative idea, because I'm saying, no, you shouldn't. Don't worry about that. Don't try to get all the smarts here. Get smarter at how you use your resources around you. And, if I think about dependency, I'll just share something about that. So I have a business partner, and we've been business partners for 20 years. I'm absolutely dependent on her. And if it weren't her, I would find someone else. I don't try to develop all the curriculum and everything myself. She is my extended mind, and we are so much smarter together. I can only go so far on my own. And then when I bring it to her, there's the potential for brilliance. So I'm absolutely dependent on her. But that doesn't make me needy or unable to cope with life. It just means if I want brilliance, I don't try to do it all in my own head. Is that?
Absolutely. Strategic resourcefulness.
I'm just looking to see yeah. Hold on one sec. Yeah, I agree. Amanda and Richard, they're very dearly held colleagues of mine. I admire both of them very, very much. Absolutely. All right, well, let's look at the next area, which is the body. And I've actually got a quote from Mandy. Mandy basically says, our body is our social and emotional sense organ. And the old idea was that actually all of the thinking went on in our head. We now know that the body actually thinks. We have neurons in our heart. We have neurons in our gut. Our whole body is part of how we think. And we can use this, and I'll talk about how we use this in coaching. There are patterns that are too complex to be held in the conscious mind. We might think of this as intuition. Now, I know from my research that intuition is a very complex system. One aspect of it is, what is our body trying to tell us? If we are alert to these cues, these patterns, we make better decisions. And I'm going to give you an example of this. So they did research on stock traders in both London and New York. And here is what they found. It wasn't how the level of education or the school that you went to. It didn't matter if you went to, Oxford or the local college. What made a good stock trader is how attuned they were to something called interoception, which is perception internally. Basically, how tuned into were they that their heart started beating faster, or that they got flushed, or whatever their cues were. And that's how, and the stock traders who used this interoception to make their decisions did far better in the profession. Somehow what was happening is their body could process some kind of pattern that said, buy the stock or don't buy the stock. Really, really fascinating research that has been replicated. Most people in today's world, too many people in today's world, think that everything is from here up. And I think having our clients check in with what's going on internally is very validated in terms of actually helping you make better decisions. And someone said early on, making a decision at work. And one way of extending your mind is not try to make all the decisions sort of logically, but check into what are the patterns that your body might be picking up on. And you pick up on that through having a better connection to what's happening internally. It's like, that would be my question for somebody who's trying to make a difficult decision. What does your body know? And use that at least as part of the information, because we do make better decisions. The body also helps us ground abstract concepts. By feeling it, we understand it more fully. So here's what we can do in coaching. I love this quote, by the way. Without the body, the brain would certainly transform into purely selfish intelligence, devoid of the emotional substrate of human beings. Body is also how we feel each other. So in coaching, we can have our clients get up and change positions to evoke different perspectives. Even hand movements, even having them, if they're trying to make a decision between two things, use their hands, not just abstractly think about it, physically move their hands can change how they understand it. I highly, highly recommend this. I think all too often we believe that coaching is just happening here. And it's miraculous how changing positions can really help somebody gain a new perspective. We can ask a client to stand in a certain way or embody a particular emotion. I had a coach ask me how I stood as the best leader self. And this is a time I didn't have a lot of confidence. This was 20 years ago. And I stood and it was like this with my chest up and my shoulders down. I still remember that. And I've used that for 20 years. And every time I stand like this, I feel more confident. That's what my brain is processing as well. I can embody that and I can bring that feeling that he brought me into on. And we can ask our clients to check in with their bodies to see what information is there to help them process a decision. So these are all things I think sometimes they don't get made as much of a priority as they should be. And this is Mandy's work in coaching is around this, how we can use the body more in coaching. Very, very critical if you're working with anyone who's had any trauma, because it lives in the body and it can't be understood or released unless the body is involved. So I'm hoping that the coaching world starts paying more attention. I was very disappointed. I'm an expert on the ICF competencies. I wrote a book about the ICF competencies. The new competencies do not include any sort of body work as a specific competency. And I think that's a big fail, because I think we're using a smaller portion of our understanding by only talking about it and not involving the body. So, by the way, it's interesting for Zoom, people report that presenters who use more hand signals, who use their hands more, that they actually understand the content more. I naturally use my hands. So there you go. All right, feel free to put in any questions in the chat. I do want to keep going because I need to honor the time. Let's talk about the last two, externalizing and using physical space. So if we can get things out of our head, we can often understand them more fully. There are many concepts or problems or challenges and they're too complex to be fully grasped by the brain alone. We can hold that. People talk about the multitasking. We can hold one thought. So if you think about, this is something people already do. Like authors will put up their whole book on a wall and move Post-its around like this woman is doing here. We will, you'll be in a conference room and people will be writing on the whiteboard or using a mind map. We understand we kind of have to get this out in order to sometimes see things we haven't been able to see and understand what we know and what we don't know. If we have strong neural connections that have to do with our spatial abilities, our ability to navigate through space. When we make a problem like a physical object, like we use something, and I've got a coaching tool, I don't think we'll have time to do it, but it's very simple, and I'll just talk you through it quickly so you can try it on your own. But the tool is about making a problem into physical space, like maybe using two objects and thinking of how they interact. This actually activates motor neurons and they help us understand the problem rather than just being left to the neurons that are in sort of our problem solving ability. It makes us smarter. And then our physical surroundings shape how we think and what we focus on. If you're in a very depressing office, it's harder to feel hopeful. If you're in a creative space, we tend to spark with more ideas. And the research is very good on that. And they're wasted if we just are always just sitting at, in front of the computer. Moving, getting things physical will extend our ability to understand this. We can't just always be right here. We don't tie into everything that is available. So in coaching, I love this. Space can be an important stimulus of creativity, get inspired by the environment. Our brain develops ideas and implements thoughts that it gets exposed to by its surroundings, even if we don't actively think about them. You go for a beautiful walk in the garden and you start having these amazing ideas that are inspired, even though you're not thinking about that flower. The same is true in terms of being limited when you're in a very maybe depressing place to work. It is part of how we think. So in coaching, We can have, you can have multiple participants embody a human system. They call this constellation work or internal systems. This is very, very popular in team coaching, and it's very powerful and unforgettable. One-to-one coaching, I talked about using physical objects to represent aspects of a system or issue. We can mind mapping, just getting things out of our heads, just lists, just diminishing the stress by putting things in a list. You do this already, super powerful. I just did an index of a blog that I was writing because I couldn't remember what I'd already written. And it showed me, oh, here's what you've covered and here's where the holes are. I had to get it out of my head. At 100 posts, I couldn't remember them. So just lists are actually part of how we externalize. And we can ask our clients to get up and move when they feel very stuck. Again, this has to do with overlap with the body, and explore how things look from a different place. I want to talk about technology very quickly. It's an extension of memory. It's an easier way to process some things, gives you flexibility. You can share information. The problem is it does not replace and should not replace the other three. And sometimes we get so enamored of the technology that we forget that we could actually be, connected socially. Like I have a rule, no phones at the table, because I want to be connected. And sometimes my partner will be like, well, let me look that up. Like, no, do that later. Let's stay in the conversation. Let's not disrupt that, because it can pull us away from the other ways, the other three ways that we're thinking. What we can do with technology, use reminders. We could, use technology to send provocative questions. We can use online assessments, and there are coaching platforms. Probably one of the more helpful things that I find in technology is actually, what do they call it? There's a word for it, extended technology, which is technology that helps us with social connection, or with externalization, helps us with some of the other three. Seems to be the place that I'm the most interested in technology. So let's see. The smart move is not to lean ever harder on the brain, but to learn to expand beyond it. So I think about, what else might we do to help clients even more effectively extend their minds? What ideas are coming up? What else do you have to do? Let's see, I'm going to look at the chat. What else do you do in coaching that you think helps your clients extend the mind that I didn't talk about? Or what else might we do? And I've got some ideas, and I'm going to look at the chat real quick. Our body can be imagined to be a chariot. That's beautiful. Pause and center. Yes, let the body settle. I really love that. Pooja, what I would also say is that sometimes you need to have the client get connected, and using the body as a way to get connected and present, to be mindful in the moment, so that they are coachable. Because a mind that is scattered and all over the place may not be coachable. You may not be able to use your coaching skills to do that. So ask powerful questions. That's part of that relational way that I think we extend the mind, is by asking a question they may not have thought of, and agitating their imagination or helping them make a neural connection. I don't have what I would say about the science about what you are seeking eludes you. It's a really good question. In fact, I'm sitting here with I've got a quote up on my wall about this. I need to think about the science behind that. I think it is a very strongly and well argued spiritual concept. And I need to think about, well, what might be I don't have that at the top of my mind. What would the science be about what you are seeking eludes you? I think I have this up on my wall right now because I want to look there, and I don't have the science behind that right at this particular moment. Visualize their goal, extend their mind through their imagination. And this might come in with some of the other ways, I think. We can ask sometimes if a client says something like, I feel the weight of the world on my shoulders, or whatever they might say. I like to have them embody that, embody what they're saying and see what that tells them. I think that's a fascinating way to get the body involved in the coaching. Thank you for being here. I'm sorry we're going over. You can ask your clients to check in with their bodies more. We can work with clients to see if there is technology that helps them with issues or challenges. Maybe there's a way, if they're very disorganized, maybe there is some technology that will help them. Creating an inspiring space. If they're feeling dry and that they're uninspired, they might create something that is more inspiring or reflects more who they want to be. Restorative time in nature, to have that external influence of a beautiful setting. It is one of my favorite homeworks of clients to have them, if they're stuck with a question, have them go walk in nature, leaving that sort of inquiry open and see what nature might tell them. And then working with metaphors, I think, is a really good way to help people move the issues out of their client's more linear processing system, or draw for me what this looks like, is a great way of extending the mind. And there's some, it's a really long quote, and I'm not sure where I got it from. I'm like, it's actually was a page out of a book. So I'm sorry. I don't have that one, but it is something I am thinking about. So I'm rushing a little bit. My apologies. I want to show you this tool very quickly. Please give this a try. It's not that complicated. You can have them choose, it's basically 3 objects. You have them choose an object, but have them be something they can pick up and hold, because that way their body will give them more information about it. It helps them externalize, and it also helps them use the physical touch. So basically it's 3 things. You pick an object that represents the issue. You ask them, how does that represent your issue or challenge? What do you notice? You have them pick an object that maybe represents where they want to be. I'm just picking stuff from my desk. What does this tell you? And then the magic is in the 3rd way. And then they pick an object that might take them, and pick my little fan, from where they are to where they want to be. And you really just asking them to do 3 things, and then you have their brain get creative. And I'm sorry we don't have time for a demo, but I'm telling you, just be awkward, give it a try, practice on a coach friend, practice on each other, because this is a magical process. And it's really all you need are these very few questions that I put up here, and to trust your client. And so see what happens. Yeah, I think I knew that may be part of it. My brain is not right there now. And so sometimes I'm like, oh, I do have thoughts about that. But I do think that basically our brains are not there. What we've learned for many years is they don't process the negative. And so when you're constantly focused on what you don't have, it can have a tendency for you to filter more the evidence that you don't have it. And that's why sort of affirmations can be so difficult, because it does kind of put you in this reminder of what you don't have. I think that's a really good point from like a neurological perspective. That's probably part of it. And there are ways to get around that. I think that makes perfect sense. Thank you.
I have a question here.
Yeah,
so
please.
We talked about many ways in which we can extend the mind of the coachee during the conversation. Do you think there is a requirement to extend the mind of a coach also?
Yeah, I love that. I think this is why it's really important that we have things like our own coach, or our own practice groups, or our own, do the own work on your relationship with your body. I think that's a really, really good question. So I will tell you, and I probably should have talked about this, and that's brilliant. In coaching, I use my body a lot. I may be listening to a client, and there's might be a pattern that my body's trying to tell me about, or something that doesn't feel right, that alerts me to maybe asking a different question like that. So I think practicing that attunement is really good. I also think anything we're going to ask the client to do, we should be doing. We should be walking the talk. And so if we're going to ask a client to check in with what their body is saying or to embody a posture, we should have practice in doing it so that we're authentic. I think, having a space that feels like, I know many coaches who have created beautiful coaching spaces with, inspiring words or objects. There are things that I keep on my shelf. I keep this is a brain that one of my clients gave me. It's made of rose quartz. And so I just think of this as such a beautiful brain, and that is in my line of vision. I try to have my space very clean. So that's part of how I extend the mind and, have a loving space for my classes and my clients. So yeah, absolutely. I think that's a really good question.
Thank you so much, Ann, for answering
Yeah,
that.
thank you. So just couple more things. Here are resources. And again, I'll share this right away afterwards so that you can have this. A couple that were mentioned. I have a paper on the competencies, the fabulous book by Annie Murphy Paul, Amanda's book, and then the neuroscience of coaching, some really great resources. We do advanced coaching. If you're interested, this is how you get in touch with me. And yep, I think that is it. But if you want to check if you want contact information for me, I also love to connect on LinkedIn. I use LinkedIn a lot. I post a lot of things on LinkedIn. So please feel free to reach out for me. I always accept requests from coaches.
Thank you, Ann. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me. And please stay connected.